Good evening. I'm Michael Williams. I'm Secretary of the Lundy Field Society, and it's my great pleasure to have you along for this week's Lundy Talk. It's a rather special talk this evening, as we will be joined by Rosie Ellis, direct from Lundy. Rosie is going to give us a short update on her engagement activities in her role as Education Officer. She will then tell us about life on Lundy during the lockdown, and she also has a video to show us. There will be plenty of time at the end for questions. As some of you may know, the Lundy internet connection can sometimes be no better probably than two tin cans joined together with a piece of string. So please do bear with us if we have connectivity problems. We have a number of backup plans that include Rosie joining us by phone, and we've also got copies of her presentation here, so we can still show her slides. Unfortunately for me, I'm still in my flat in Cambridge, despite the illusion that I might appear in the tavern. The programme of future talks is coming together, and I'll outline the plans at the end of tonight's event. But as a taster, next week I'm going to be joined by Chris D, who will introduce us to bird ringing. You may have seen the nets that the bird ringers use in Milcombe or St John's Valley. So Chris is going to tell us about what how they're used and what they're used for. But before I introduce tonight's speaker, as usual, there are a few housekeeping things to mention. Like before, only the microphones and video cameras on my computer and Rosie's computer are enabled, so we won't be able to see or hear any of the audience. Those of you who are on Zoom are able to ask questions using the Q&A function. You need to click the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen and then type your question into the box that pops up. If you're on a mobile, then you can find it on the menu bar. We've had some questions submitted in advance, and Rosie's happy to take more at the end, so please do type your questions in as we go along. There's also a chat feature, which I can see some of you have already discovered, so you can use that for comments and feedback, and we'll be monitoring that during the talk. Welcome also to those of you who are joining us on YouTube. Unfortunately, we can't interact with you, so there's no facility for asking questions. Once again, Dave Richards is behind the scenes, keeping an eye on the technology, and is hosting this Zoom session, and we will make a recording available afterwards. So without further ado, it's time for me to introduce our speaker direct from Lundy. Now, hopefully, Rosie's there. Hello, Rosie.
Hello. Hello, everybody.
So Rosie Ellis moved to Lundy last August, all the way from Woolacombe in North Devon, where she worked as a beach ranger for the National Trust for the last 2 summers. With a bit of a break to travel to New Zealand and sail across the Atlantic and do a master's degree, she has worked in conservation and engagement for the past 8 years. During the boat season, she is responsible for leading visits by school parties as part of the 3-year National Lottery Heritage funded St Helen Centre project. That's quite a mouthful. Throughout the year, she leads walks and talks on Lundy while assisting the Warden and conservation team and undertaking survey, biosecurity and practical conservation work to ensure the future of the island. So, my great pleasure to introduce Rosie for tonight's talk this evening. Welcome, Rosie, and over to you.
Okay, brilliant. Right. Hello, everybody. I'm just going to share my presentation. There we go. So I think. So first and foremost, hope you're all doing well and enjoying the sunshine on the mainland any way you can. And a big thank you to all the previous speakers. We're all on the island, we're all really enjoying them. Thank you to Michael and of course David for doing all of the grunt work in the background, do all the technical bits, and being very patient, doing some test runs with me yesterday as well. And many thanks to Angie Cleave and Simon Dell for their talks so far. So first of all, I'm just going to go through a little bit about what I was doing at the end of last year and was meant to be doing this year. And then I've got the little video to show you and then go on to what life has actually been like on Lundy during lockdown. There we go. So I arrived in August last year to a very beautiful island and got to see a little sneak peek of what the island is like in peak season. But only got a few weeks of that, got to do some snorkel safaris and everything like that. So the reason why I'm here is partly as an education officer. So that's as part of this big 3-year, £1.5 million project funded partly by the Heritage Lottery Fund with lots of donations for individuals, as well as Lundy Island and the Church of England as well. So the church conservation work is all finished and it looks amazing. I'm sure lots of you have been to see it in all its new glory, and it even won an award as well for its heritage project of the year in the Southwest. So congratulations to all the team for that. Yay. Also, what's gone up this year is the banners. So I spoke to the lovely Alice Crane here, who was working away with teams of hundreds of volunteers. I'm sure lots of you joined in as well to stitch all of the banners, which were put up in July, I think it was. They were put up in the church. And they are now not currently up. They're just they're being assessed for long-term conservation. But they looked absolutely beautiful. So thank you to all involved in that project there. What else has been happening in the church? So this 3-year project is to try and make the church used more, and definitely it has been used more this year. So we had about 2,000 people almost who came to visit Septimus, who was displayed, who's this 2.4 metre long grey seal who's displayed in the church. With Cornwall Seal Group and Research Trust. So many thanks to Sue Sayer and all of her volunteers and staff who made that happen, including a very nerve-wracking flight back for Septimus the seal on the helicopter. But it was amazing for everybody to see, including all the school groups who came along as well. What else has been happening in the church? Well, of course, we've got our monthly church services. And now all the clergy members who can stay in the vestry while they're doing their services. We also had the big 50th anniversary celebration, celebrating 50 years of the Landmark Trust and the National Trust working together to look after Lundy. So that was a packed out church. with lots of people who could come across. Unfortunately, it was very, very, very windy with big seas, so not everybody could come to that big celebration. So apologies if you could not make it across, but there was lots of celebrating done on your behalf, we promise. We've also been using the church for some university talks, so lots of you will know about the long-running Sparrow project that we have on Lundy. So we had students from Imperial and Sheffield University who came and did some talks to the islanders and to some guests as well. And then, of course, the school groups. So that's part of the main reason, part of my job is to lead these school groups. And if we've got a longer bit of a day, or if it's a little bit rainy, then we use the church as a base for exploring the island. So definitely has been used lots this year. So for our Heritage Lottery funded project, we have a certain amount of school groups that we're meant to have. And we had many more than we needed to. So about 700 students in total came to Lundy who might not come. If you see this blue bit here, that's just any cancelled sailing. Unfortunately, apologies for our school who had to have their sailing cancelled twice, and then were then moved to the spring, and then of course couldn't come across because of the lockdown. So we will hopefully eventually get you here one day, but that may be fairly far in the future. So for this year, we've got some really new exciting projects. So we've got Francis Stewart, who's been working on our teachers pack and resources. We've also got an updated information booklet and a little flip chart that we'll be working on for the crossing on the Oldenburg to see what they can spot, because quite often, of course, you spot gannets and dolphins, and we want to make sure everybody knows what they are seeing on their journey. If you were travelling on the Oldenburg in the last few weeks, you would have seen the results of our competition as well. So last year, all of our students, they did some poems to be displayed on the Oldenburg, and here's one sent in from Ilfracombe Junior School as well. So congratulations to the winners, but they will be displayed on the Oldenburg when sailings do resume. But of course, I won't attempt to guess when that might be. I'll leave that for Derek, our island manager, and of course all the high ups to decide. So all of these school groups, they would not have been possible without our brilliant team of ambassadors. For the ambassadors, we use as a backmark for our school groups, but they also do lead some groups as well, some guided walks from the jetty and from the tavern. They also do walks and talks on the mainland as well about Lundy. So they would have been very, very busy this year with our Marine Festival, which unfortunately had to be postponed. So a lot of work went into that. Robert Irving, months and months, if not a year's worth of work went into planning this big Marine Festival that we were due to have this year. So unfortunately that's had to be postponed, but lots of the work will be still useful for when we do eventually run it. So we were due to have 132 days worth of volunteering from our ambassadors, which is a big time commitment for some of them. So I'm sure sat at home in lockdown, most of you would love to come to Lundy. But if it's something that you think you would like to do, even if you just like to be a backmark, or if you'd like to do talks on the mainland, or if you felt confident enough to be trained up to do some walks, then we are looking to recruit some new ambassadors as well. So we ask that ambassadors can commit at least 4 days of the year to come to Lundy, and in exchange get lots of treats and a very snazzy looking uniform as well. So have a little think if you wanted to join us as an ambassador, and then you can always email me at assistantwarden@lundyisland.co.uk if you're interested for a little application form. But have a real think about how much time you can commit, and if you could commit those 4 days over the year. So I think I'm going to hand back over now to Michael to introduce the little video.
Great. Thanks very much, Rosie. So I'm sure you'll get plenty of volunteers coming forward for the ambassador scheme.
That'd be brilliant.
So yeah, great summary of what's been happening in terms of the engagement and education officer part of Rosie's role over the past 12 months. We're going to move into the sort of quickly move into the next part of Rosie's talk. So we'll take questions for all parts of the talk at the very end. So we're going to move into the life in lockdown on Lundy part of the talk. So we're going to show a video. I've been taken off air, but hopefully I'm back. So we're going to show a short video and then Rosie will give us an update on what's going to happen, what's been happening on Lundy during lockdown. So we should run VT now, hopefully.
I realise now what a crazy amount of gannets there was on that video, but it was a really, really nice day, so I had to put lots of the gannets in. So now I'm just going to do a little bit about what lockdown has been like on Lundy. So the second part of my presentation here. There we go. So we are still having to social distance here. It was initially thought that we could treat each other like a big household, but then that's not been the case at all. So we've had advice from the government and from the NHS saying that as we do have some vulnerable people on the island, and we are still getting deliveries from the Oldenburg, even though we're all well, nobody's had any symptoms whatsoever, we do still need to carry on social distancing. So the tavern is of course closed and has been even before we had when we had guests on the island. The tavern was still closed for about a week or so before we completely closed the island. But the shop has remained open just for the islanders, so 3 people in at a time. So many thanks to Sue, our essential worker Sue, who's kept us in the style to which we've become accustomed, with lots and lots of food, enough dried stores to last forever, it seems. We did have a fairly serious incident at one point when we ran out of boxes of red wine, but that's Rob here holding about a third of the delivery that we got afterwards. So we're now stocked back in boxes of wine. And as I say, dried goods and flour, which I hear is pretty hard to come by on the mainland, we've still got plenty of, so lots of baking can be done by all the residents. Fresh fruit and veg and bread is not as easy to come by. So up until now, we've been having a sailing about every when we had a 3-week gap because of weather at one point when we didn't have any deliveries, and now we're going to go to 1 sailing a month. So you have to plan out what you want, how much fruit and veg you want for the month, and we have a big delivery which you actually, for the fruit and veg, we do individually, and we say what we want rather than having it all stocked in the shop. And then things like milk, we have a frozen stock. Derek has offered to come across mid-month as well if we get desperate for anything on the rib boat, but the Oldenburg will only be sailing once a month, as lots of us, including me, as of today, will be furloughed for 3 weeks and then work a week to get the sailing, to get all the deliveries in. So the farm has still been running, so lots of Lundy is still a working farm. There are sheep absolutely everywhere at the moment. So you may have seen there was some people got some shots of all the lambs in the beer garden when the tavern was closed. And as I speak, I'm looking at some sheep that are grazing by the nook as well. So lots of locations that we usually wouldn't have the sheep in. We've had grazing. There was a question in the past from Carol, I believe it was, about shearing. So yes, we will have to eventually shear the sheep. Tom has partly sheared some of them where they were getting matted. So we do have the facilities to shear them. Usually we get a whole team in to do the shearing. But yeah, that's something that we will have to look at. The ponies are all doing well. So St John is still down, and I can see him from my window, one of our foals. They're still doing well, but Tibby has gone back up to the herd with the rest of the ponies to carry on grazing north of Quarter Wall and beyond. So they're all doing well. 5 pigs went off as well with the Oldenburg last time, so we are still farming, and Tom's doing a great job. You can hear him pootling about on his quad at all times of the day and night as well, as I'm sure you can appreciate. It's been very, very busy for him for lambing, and still a few more ewes left to go to lamb. And then I'll say a little bit about what I've been up to. So this little shot from Andrew Cleave's talk last week, and he mentioned the rhododendron. So that is the bulk of what I have been doing, with a little bit of strimming to make sure people can get to their allotments and through out of their front doors, etc. But the rhododendron eradication programme we've still been doing work towards it. So we have so far found 8 flowering plants, which is quite a big jump up from last year's 4, I believe it was, from last year. But they were all found, of course, before they went to seed. So that means that these 6,000 seeds that could have been spread and then grown up have not. So of course, if you didn't see Andrew's talk last week, rhododendron is a very, very beautiful plant, but very destructive to the wildlife, particularly on Lundy, as we've got some really, really rare endemic species. So the Lundy cabbage, which gets crowded out by the rhododendron. So that's why we're attempting to eradicate it. And we are in the kind of final years, but it will still be another 10 years before we completely eradicate it. But we are doing lots and lots of work on that. And I'd like to say a really, really big thank you to all the volunteers who've been out looking for flowers. So that's Matt and Pia, who've done so many hours volunteering, looking for them. And Dean, of course, and also Sue, Kobe and Rach, who've been a really big help looking for the rhododendron and for the flowers. And we have been digging up some seedlings. Another question from the talk last week was about if members of the public should pick the rhododendron if they find it. The simple answer to this is no. Rhododendron can grow back from the roots, and if you don't get the whole plant, it can then grow back but lower down, harder to find, and possibly harder to find the flowers, and then would make the eradication programme more difficult. But if you did want to come and volunteer, then the Lundy Field Society do their working parties. So you can join the Lundy Field Society and join the working party if you wanted to come and help mark out the plants. And if you did see a flower and you were 100% sure that you knew that it was rhododendron, then yes, you could pick the flower, make sure you know exactly where it is to come and tell me or the Warden Dean where it was, and make sure you put it somewhere where it's not going to go to seed as well. But yeah, the simple answer, if in doubt, leave the rhododendron where it is, but come and tell a member of the conservation team where you saw it. But bearing in mind there was 5,000 plants found last year, there's still quite a few, so you can still find them as well. So what some of the other staff have been up to. So I mentioned Rachel came to help with some of the rhododendron project, but she's also been running about, and I think she's 22 miles is her highest amount that she's run in one day so far. But she is now going to run a marathon on Lundy in the coming weeks, and she's raising money for the mental health charity Mind. So if anybody wants to support her doing that, that would be really, really appreciated. She's got a Just Giving website, which is up here at the top. And if you Google Lundy Running Rach Just Giving, then it will come up as well. So I'm sure she'd appreciate some donations for that charity there. The lovely Helen as well, who usually works in the tavern. She's been doing some work on her own little pottery room. So this is just where the pigs used to be kept, just above the beer garden, and where there's a little greenhouse. So she's doing some lime watering with some advice from the Old Light Conservation Project, Charlie and Rachel, about how to try and restore that building and get it back into a usable state. And she's got a big wheel and a kiln that she's been doing some pottery on, so keeping busy. Then Dean, of course, has been in his element, birding all day, every day. Some of the questions also had come in about bird ringing. So he can still do the bird ringing, and is out mornings when the winds allow to do some bird ringing. Highlights are all put on the Lundy Bird blog. So if you're missing your Lundy fix, probably about every 3 days, Dean does a little update of what he's seen in the last week or so, with all of his highlights. So highlights of lockdown so far for me would definitely be the hoopoe. That was a lifer for me. And for Dean, I'm sure, I think the rustic bunting just here is one of his highlights. And that was, yeah, just last week that was. So definitely, if you're wanting to know what is happening on Lundy more often, then head over to the Lundy Birds blog, and all of the wildlife sightings are put up there. You can have a look back through what you've seen. And then I think I'm going to head back over to Michael now for some extra questions. There we go.
Sorry, slight delay. Thanks very much, Rosie. Really fantastic to have that sort of behind the scenes tour of everything that's going on the island, while those of us who are sitting here at home watching and wishing that we were there. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Sorry to rub it in.
Yeah, I think there's a number of people who are down the other end of the line here who are all extremely jealous of the situation that you're in. Very occasionally we're having a slight little bit of glitch with your audio feed, so if it gets any worse, then we'll take off Rosie's video. But I think at the moment it's perfectly manageable. But if the sound deteriorates any further, then we'll take your video off. So we've got a number of questions coming in already. We had some questions sent to us beforehand, so we'll get straight on to those. I've already seen about 2 or 3 questions about rabbits, so we're going to go rabbits first. Okay. So Carol Lee had sent in a question beforehand, and I've also got a question from Jim Wilson. So Carol says that where she lives in North Cornwall, last year the rabbit population near home had what did she say? Last year the rabbit population near home, North Cornwall, started, and this year has really taken off. It was disappointing that similar recovery was not happening on Lundy after the disastrous hemorrhagic disease some years ago. So are any rabbits being seen now, and is there a hopeful sign of any comeback?
Yeah, so in the last kind of few weeks, we have started to see more rabbits. So I was at Jenny's Cove the other day, and I think we saw 3, which in other days would have probably a few months ago would have been very unheard of. Of course, years and years ago, you couldn't move for rabbits. But even since I've been here in August, I've seen the population really even go down since I've been here. But then, as I say, in the last few weeks / month, it has started to go back up again. So I think that's quite encouraging that, yeah, I think the rabbits, hopefully, touch wood, are beginning to recover. Yeah.
And Jim Wilson's question is, have you seen any black rabbits? Lundy's famous for its black rabbits.
No, I haven't. I have, even since August, I've not seen any black rabbits, and I haven't heard of a sighting of one for a very long time. So yeah, just your normal brownie coloured rabbits, but I will keep an eye out. I'll get the the ultimate shots of black rabbits would be good. I'll try.
Thank you, Rosie. So we'll stay with the wildlife theme. There's a question from Bob Gardner who says, are there any nesting peregrines on the island?
Yeah, I think if I told you that, I'd have to kill you. So legally, you're not meant to say if there's where we have nesting peregrines or not. So I can't say. But we do have peregrines that fly over and are here. Yeah.
We'll move swiftly on. So Trevor Doby has sent a question in advance. He'd like to know if a new ranger has been appointed after Nick Herbert left the island in October.
Yeah, so we have a kind of mid-recruitment process at the moment. So we did have a couple who came across working interview who were brilliant. We loved them, but they decided not to take the job in the end. So we have a few people on file who look brilliant as well. So when the lockdown lifts and when it's appropriate, we will be contacting them, and we know they've been sent an email saying that that's what the situation is. But I think maybe that's something to save for if Derek does come as well. Question.
Let's move on to the Zoom, some of the Zoom questions. I'll go back to some of the other questions in a moment. So Mark Norris asks, how many people are on the island at the moment?
So there is 24 of us on the island at the moment, I think, if I've counted correctly. So we have our engineer, Rolf, who's brilliant. He went just before lockdown. His wife lives on the mainland. So he's on the mainland at the moment with his wife. And then Kevin and Julie are off the island at the moment as well. So just around about 24 of us, I think.
So I've got a question from Clive Smith, who I know likes to get in a question early every week, but he hasn't been first this time. His question is, it's fabulous to have seen the progress of the church project over the last few years and pictures of more additions since last July. It's good that the interest in visiting groups is exceeding expectations. How do you in normal times go about generating even more interest, and can us visitors join a small session even at relatively short notice, i.e. once we've arrived for our stay?
So when you say session, is this for a service, for a church service?
I think Clive's probably talking about the engagement and the activities that go on.
Yeah. So in terms of the school groups, we're pretty much at capacity. So we're starting to get to the stage where we only contact schools within a certain distance, because there's only a certain amount of sailings in term time. So yeah, we can't really increase that anymore. But then we do also, so we have there's things are advertised in the tavern, is usually a good place to advertise these things, and then also up on the church board as well. So yeah, the events in the church tend to be one-offs, but of course Septimus was advertised quite widely as well. So keep an eye out on the Lundy Facebook page. And also, if you arrive on the island, the tavern's the best place to have a look at the notice board as well.
And staying with that theme, John Tyra, who's provided the photos for the sequence at the start of these talks, he's got a question. He says, as a teacher, I've always wanted to bring a group over from my school, but I wonder if any school parties are actually stayers rather than just over for a day trip.
Yeah, so you can come across as a residential trip, but the amount of contact time that I'd be able to give you on that would be just a few hours during the day, or possibly longer on non-boat days. So yeah, that's something to send to my assistant warden account if you were prepared to take on the kind of welfare side and looking after the children for the majority of the time. We could work in some help on particularly on non-boat days, when I'm likely to have more time to dedicate to the students.
I've got a message from somebody called Derek Green. Have you heard of him?
Oh yeah.
He says, fantastic talk, Rosie. Keep up the good work.
Oh, good. Hi,
Derek. Let's pick out some of these other messages. Edmund Goody. So Edmund was one of the volunteer assistant rangers last year. He says, hi all. This is my second Lundy Zoom meeting, and I've tuned in and I've enjoyed both of them.
Oh,
so
brilliant.
It's good to hear from you, Edmund.
Yeah.
Let's go with another question here. So Jennifer Baines asks, the local flora and fauna here in Essex has definitely benefited from the reduction in pollution and the quieter streets. What have you noticed for the impact on Lundy?
So it's been quite a stark contrast, really. So the deer have really shifted where they are. So they will literally come up to you and approach you, and some of the young are really we've got a few videos actually I'll try and put up on the Facebook page of them coming within meters of you. So they're not as scared off the top of the plateau, and they're not spending as much time on the East Coast. We think that may have had an effect on the wildflowers, and obviously this is my first spring, so I've not seen what to compare it to. But Dean has specifically said that it's been a really, really, really good year for the wildflowers on the east coast. So we think that might just be because of lack of trampling from the deer, and then lack of grazing of some species of plant as well. And then, of course, I didn't even mention, we had the 300 dolphins spotted in the landing bay and on the east coast as well. And I don't know if that's there's some talk about the reduction in shipping and if that's had an impact. But then we have the resident population as well of dolphins, so we'd expect to see a few, but perhaps not 300.
Great. I think you've also answered the question that Helen Root had asked, which was, are any of the animals and birds behaving differently with so few people on the island? So it sounds like certainly the deer are. Yeah,
and so there's a few bracken starting to grow up in the middle of footpaths as well, which would never happen. And then there's a few species that have started nesting in areas where we wouldn't necessarily have seen them in previous years. So I'll have to check with Dean if they did decide to nest or not. But yeah, we're starting, there's the poor sparrows though are looking very forlorn because they don't have all of the scraps to eat in the tavern garden. So having to feed them lots of seeds and things. So it's not good for all species, but lots of them, I'm sure are appreciating just having the 24 of us here.
So I've got two questions here from Dave Oddy. So his first question is, will the access to the quarry beach be opened?
Yes, eventually. So that is one of the jobs which we're going to try and get done. And we were hoping to get a contractor across to do some of the work, which is more difficult now. But yes, that is will definitely be a job which is on the books for the next kind of few months.
It's on the list, like so many things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Dave's second question is about the Heligo land bird trap on the quarry terraces. So he says, will that be reinstated and be made use of?
Yep, so I think there's been a lot of talk with Dean and with the LFS and also with Historic England about this, because of course the quarries are scheduled ancient monument, and digging into them you need permission for, and it's very quite a controversial subject, the Heligo land trap. So the last I heard, there was still being discussions about it, but yes, the hope is eventually it will be reinstated and be used as well. Yeah, so and I can add to that from a Lundy Field Society perspective. So Lundy Field Society has been looking into this because the bird trap sits on the quarry site, then the quarry is a scheduled monument. We need scheduled monument consent in order to do any work to the structure. So we're currently in the process of trying to get those permissions. But it may be a question that Chris D can pick up next week when he talks about bird ringing, because he's involved in that sort of project, I suppose, to try and get the Heligo land bird trap restored and back into use. Okay, so please do keep typing your questions in, those of you watching on Zoom. I've got a question about climate change monitoring from Peter Long. So he's picked up on something that Andrew said in his talk last week, where he mentioned that certain plants are flowering earlier, and there'll be data on the appearance of migrating animals appearing early and so on. So he asks if there's any work being done into evidencing climate change or global warming from Lundy data and Lundy observations. Yeah, so I've had a little look. There's not that many papers specifically on climate change. It's mentioned in some papers, So in terms of the marine world, we've got the Cup Coral Survey, which has been running since the 1970s, if not before, which we did manage to do this year on the really low tide as well. So there's some studies on the presence on how on the population of the cup corals, which you could use, but that's already a warm water species, which we're at its northern range. So with the Marine Festival that was due to happen this year, that was hopefully, that was one of the subjects which was going to be researched, with the presence and absence of different species and lots of transects that have been done historically, and to redo them and then use that to compare them. So that's something that hopefully when the festival does go ahead, we can do more research on. In terms of the birds data, I'm not sure if all of you would have heard, but Dean's been in some talks with the Bird Observatory Council about making Lundy an official bird observatory. And in order to get that accredited status, you have to digitize all of your data. So that would be a big project for the LFS and for some Lundy volunteers, to digitize all of the data that the Lundy Field Society has collected over the years. And once that is digitized, then it would make it infinitely easier to do some research about how the populations have changed on Lundy and how the timings have changed on Lundy as well. So that's something that I think the logbook is very good at doing, is the first date that it's been seen and the last date that things have been seen as well. And then in terms of invertebrates, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but is Alan Rowland starting to digitise some of those on iRecord as well? I don't know if you know about that more.
The Field Society is trying to get as many of its records as possible into iRecord, so there's a project underway to do that. Alan has actually given a Lundy Field Society response to Peter's question, so I assume Peter's watching then. I'll send on Alan's response to Peter's question as well from a Lundy Field Society perspective.
Well,
I've got a couple of questions about birds. So really important question here from Susan Wells. How many puffins are on the island at the moment?
Right, so at the last count, I think there was 100, well, this is from memory, from what Dean said when he bumped into me in the shop, or not bumped into, social distancing bumping in the shop. I think there was 111 active burrows. So that's slightly down on last year, but tomorrow I'm going to go up and have a look and start counting with Dean as well. So we can hopefully add a few more active burrows to that. So that would be a pair in each burrow. So yeah, it's still looking good, but just not as many as last year yet, but we're hoping to add to that.
And staying with the bird theme, Susan Maguire says, last time we visited Lundy several years ago, we saw a hoopoo and recorded it in the book in the tavern. We were told it was quite rare, so we are wondering if it's now a regular visitor.
Yeah, so we even really rare birds, at Lundy, you do tend to get quite a lot of them stopping by on their migrations. So even things like ring ouzels, which you'd have to travel to quite mountainous places to see. Lundy's quite special in that we're on quite a lot of migration routes. So when people say it's a rare bird, I'm not sure if it's most years. I'm sure there'll be lots of birders typing away furiously whether most years we see a hoopoo on Lundy. But yeah, you do get rare birds often on Lundy, which is why we have so many birders who come here, because it's so good for birding. And why they're all sat at home being very mad that they can't be here.
And the sort of postscript to Sue's question, she says, thanks Rosie, we are really enjoying your presentation tonight, Sue and Jim Maguire.
Oh, thank you.
Helen Root says, well done, Rosie. You really bring Lundy to life.
Oh.
I've had a couple of comments from Robin Hall. Hello, Robin. He says it's the first time that he's seen me drinking water in the tavern. So cheers. I'll have a pint later on. And he's actually got a question. He wants to know when the marathon attempt is and will there be some live coverage to whip up donations?
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, so Rach says that she's she's at the moment she's starting to reduce the amount of miles that she's doing in a day. And I offer to help carb load as well on her behalf. But she is probably going to be next week or the week after. But she's going to see in terms of the weather and do it on a day when there's no boat. So we've all got time to go and cheer her on. And yes, we will put it on the Lundy Facebook page as well. But yeah,
I'm sure we can help promote that. It's a really great idea. A question from Robin Shrubsole, who says lockdown is a great time for local natural history studies. Are you doing anything that you wouldn't have time for normally?
So this is my my first day of furlough. So I think I will be. I have read some more of the books in the tavern, which I hadn't had a chance to before. The Harmon one, that's really good. With all the, that's one of my favourites. And then, but at the moment, up until now, I've been working 8 till 5. And then I've got to cook dinner and do my little bit of exercise. So actually, I haven't had as much time on my hands as I thought I might do. But hopefully in the next kind of few days and weeks. So I've got 3 weeks before the boat comes, and then I'll be back on work for a week. Yeah, definitely we'll be out and about surveying the puffins as well. So you get a bit more time to do that, definitely.
I've got a question from Andrew Wilby, church warden. Hello, Andrew. He says, well done, Rosie, super presentation. Question, has Dean put up the Swift boxes on the church yet?
I don't think he has, no, but I will check with him. And if he has, I'll take a picture for you. Yeah.
Great, I'm sure Andrew will appreciate that. Jennifer Baines again, she says, thank you everyone for putting this together. It's made me even more nostalgic for the island we all love. Bob Gardner has come back. He says, what's happened at Quarry Beach? So that's following up from Dave Oddy's question earlier on about repairing the access.
Yeah, so we've got the steps down to Quarry Beach are in a bit of disrepair at the moment. So for safety reasons, we had to close the steps down. So we do have all of the parts on the island for it. But yeah, so we will eventually be repairing them, but it has been quite a while that there's not been access down to Quarry Beach. So yeah, that is one of the jobs.
I've got a question from Corinne Lewis, who says, will you be needing volunteers with the education project?
Yeah, brilliant. So if you wanted to volunteer, that assistant warden at lundyisland.co.uk account, if you just give me an email on that, and then when I'm back at work in a few weeks' time, then we can get you, if you wanted to sign up as an ambassador, then that would be helping with part of that. If you want to tick that box, is helping with the school groups. Yes, so that would be really appreciated. And also not only being a backmark on the days, but also going into schools beforehand and letting them know what to expect is something that we really do need people to help with as well. If that's something you'd be interested in as well, would definitely be appreciated.
Great. There's a message from Maureen Jones who says, is the pub still open? It could be the only one in the UK.
No, so the pub has been closed for a long time now, along with government guidelines. So yeah, Michael, even though it might look like Michael's in, yeah, it's looking quite sad. Very
yes, sorry to interrupt. I don't know whether Maureen was here at the start, but I'm not actually in the Morisco Tavern myself at the moment. I'm sitting in my flat in Cambridge, so it's just an illusion.
Very convincing illusion. I was very confused.
And Maureen adds, thank you, Rosie. Great talk and pictures, and helps as I should be on Lundy this week, helping you with your work.
Yeah. Actually, it's it would have been the LFS work party today, and we would have had a cruise ship yesterday, I think. So it's all of these best laid plans of mice and men.
A question from David Can. Following the great work in getting rid of rats from Lundy, when will the same be done with rabbits? And are there any plans? Are there any plans for heathland recovery at the North End?
No, so there's no. Don't worry, Carol. There's no plan to eradicate the rabbits. So the population of rabbits has crashed recently. So the populations are still very low, but that's something which we did used to when the rabbit populations were very, very high. We used to control by with the culling team who came to control the numbers of rabbits. But of course, rabbits, there's so few and far between that hasn't been done for years and years now. So it's there's no eradication program on the books at the moment. And historically for Lundy, rabbits are actually quite important as it helped to fund the building of the castles. So rabbits have been on Lundy for a long time.
We had a question about rabbits earlier on. We've got another question about rabbits from Tim Hambley. He's sort of really making a point here. You mentioned rabbits seem to be increasing in numbers. Do we really want the grazing pressure to increase? It seems that the deer dispersing more is having a beneficial effect on the flowers, as you said, so that there may already be too much grazing.
Yeah, so as with everything, it's all a bit of a balance here. So a lot of the animals that we have, we do control the numbers of. So I think that was also another question that Carol had asked as well, whether the colours would be across this year to control the numbers. So they did come across in March, but they had very, very misty and foggy conditions. So they didn't get as many animals as they'd hoped to. So that's something that we will have to account for later on in the year, hopefully eventually when they are allowed back across to control the numbers. So yeah, as I know, there's no eradication plans in general, but it's just a bit of a balancing act with controlling the numbers.
Great, thank you. Last couple of questions now. So Claire Mitchell says, hello Claire and Len. She says they've donated to Rachel's Run. Great presentation. The important question is, how is the pygmy shrew population getting on with all the properties being empty?
Oh yeah, well so for our biosecurity, every month we go around and check the wax blocks that we have to see, and you can, if you look very closely, sometimes you can see little nibble marks on the wax blocks from the shrews. And of course, if a rat did come, then it's really, really obvious the difference between a pygmy shrew and a rat. So that's something that kind of helps us vaguely see how the pygmy shrews are doing. Naturally, they would just be eating insects, so it's not, they have been surviving on Lundy for thousands of years without the scraps left by Landmark Trust customers, and I'm sure they will continue to do so. But I have noticed that the nibble marks in the properties are really going down, but you still do see them in surprising places, so tiny, but even when it's raining, sometimes it pushes them up and they'll be scampering about at night in the rain. You think what a tough life it must be to be a shrew. But yeah, there are less in the properties at the moment.
Ian Campbell's asked a question, which I think you probably already answered. Can the deer still be culled?
So yeah, for the foreseeable future, until the situation changes, we are not culling any of the deer. But yeah, I'm sure that's something that when the Oldenburg does start sailing with passengers and we do start accepting extra people to the island, I'm sure that would be one of the things which Derek will we'll be thinking about as the populations, they are getting high as well.
And our last question, a bird question. So this is from Susan Wiltu. Have there been any sightings of the chough since 2013? So people who've been visiting Lundy for a number of years will remember that there was a chough on the island that used to appear on the grass outside the tavern quite regularly, but has it been seen since?
No, so not since I've been here. So I've lived in Cornwall for a long time, so I'd be very excited to see a chough. But yeah, not since I've been here. But yeah, we will let you know. I'm sure it will be all over social media if it did come back as well. There was a cuckoo that was sighted the other day, or heard, and then Dean ran down to Milcombe to try and see it. And all he found was a pile of feathers covered in blood. So I think the peregrines may have got the cuckoo. So
gosh,
yeah, still some really exciting bird sightings, but not the chough at the moment.
So just to wrap up a couple more comments, Les McLean says, very disappointed with these talks. They are meant to ease the pain of not being able to go to the island, but they are having the opposite effect on me. Now I'm really depressed that I can't get there.
Oh, sorry.
He says he's going to carry on being a masochist and keep watching. Well done, everyone.
I'll send you some pictures of mist and fog and sideways rain if you want.
Yes, I'm sure we don't miss those bits. Yeah, and Peter Knight says, great talk, thanks. Good to know the pygmy shrews are hanging in there. And Simon Blows says, fantastic talk. Thanks, Rosie, and thanks for organising again, Michael. And we should also thank Dave Richards as well, who's behind the scenes here. Okay, so it's time then to wrap up. It's time for me to thank Rosie properly for joining us again this evening. Really enjoyed hearing about what's been happening on Lundy. So thank you, Rosie.
Oh no, thank you so much for organising, and David, of course.
Yes, so thank you also to Dave Richards, who's hosted the Zoom session. And of course, without Dave, none of this would happen and we wouldn't be able to come together to learn more about what's going on Lundy. Our talk next week is next Tuesday evening again at 7:30 p.m. and Chris D will be here to tell us about bird ringing on Lundy. The following week, I've got an exciting and slightly different talk planned. Many of you who regularly look at the Lundy Island Facebook page will have seen the stunning photos that John Tyra and Philip Limbury post. So both John and Philip are going to be joining me to talk about their photography and share some hints and tips for taking good photos of the Lundy landscape and the wildlife on Lundy. But just to add that you don't need fancy camera equipment to join us. I'm really keen to learn some tips, and I've only got the camera on my iPhone here, so I'm really keen to learn more about that. So I do hope you can join me. That'll be in 2 weeks' time. After that, I've got talks lined up about the marine life and shipwrecks on Lundy, and a talk about Lundy's archaeology. And also we heard from Derek Green earlier on this evening. I'm hoping Derek, who's Lundy's general manager, will also be joining me at some point. So that'll be a talk not to be missed. As ever, I will post details about all of these future talks on Facebook and email it out to LFS members. Like last week as well, when this webinar ends, those of you who are watching on Zoom will receive an email with a link to a short feedback survey. So I'd really appreciate if you could fill that in and send it back so that we can improve these talks. So that's about it. Thanks, Rosie, for coming. Do you want to say your farewells?
Yeah, just goodbye, everybody. And yeah, hope you all stay well. And looking forward to next week's talk.
Great, thanks very much, Rosie, and thank you everyone for attending. I really hope you found it informative, and I look forward to you joining me again next week. But until then, bye-bye.